My girlfriend, Clara, had come from truly humble beginnings, but she was incredibly brilliant. Even when we were young, her talent was obvious, and it eventually earned her a spot at Parsons, which is the best design school in the entire country. To make sure she had enough money to save up for her tuition, I made the decision to tear up my own acceptance letter and instead took a job working as a factory worker. Sometime later, one of her designs gave her the first big break she deserved, but that success also introduced her to Elias Thorne, a wealthy heir who was at the very top of the fashion industry. Everyone who saw them together said they were a new power couple, a perfect match in every way. The only person who wouldn't admit it was Clara. "I wouldn't be here today without you, Nathan," she would always tell me. "For richer or poorer, I'll always be with you." But then, things started to change. She began pushing me to copy Elias's style, trying to get me to dress just like him and to put his preferences first in everything. The day she abandoned me while I was burning up with a high fever, just to go and be with him, I finally understood that we were finished. When Elias Thorne walked out of the massive club, he was supporting a completely drunk Clara. I was standing at the entrance, awkwardly trying to explain to the bouncer that I was only there to pick someone up. The bouncer just kept blocking my way, telling me I didn't have a VIP card. No matter how I tried to prove who I was, it was completely useless. "You're Clara's boyfriend? What took you so long?" I looked up and saw Elias standing there in the flickering lights, frowning down at me. Clara was slumped against his shoulder, totally wasted, with her lips slightly parted, almost brushing against the solid column of his neck. The way they were posed looked a little too intimate. I pressed my lips together, tiptoed over, and gently took Clara's hand. "Sorry, I was working overtime," I said. "I came as soon as I got the call. Thanks for your trouble." Elias raised an eyebrow and didn't answer right away, his eyes coolly sizing me up from head to toe. After a long moment, he finally said, "It was no trouble. Clara didn't want to leave, you know." I lowered my gaze, and my eyes landed on the limited edition leather shoes Elias was wearing. The way he had said her name, Clara, just rolled over and over in my mind. Clara was smart and proud. She always preferred for people to call her Ms. Vance. She had told me once that Claire was a special nickname that was just for me. But now, that unique name was coming from another man's mouth, and for a second I didn't know how to react. I took hold of the drunken Clara and started to leave, but a clear male voice stopped me from behind. "Next time you come to get Clara, maybe change your clothes. Claire is in a crucial phase of her career. You should at least consider her reputation, don't you think?" My hands automatically clenched the hem of my faded work uniform. I had to force a smile onto my face. "I just got off the assembly line. I didn't have time to change." Elias said with a half smile, "Wow, you must work so hard." Maybe I was just imagining it, but I sensed a sharp edge of contempt in his words. I took a deep breath, half dragged and half pushed Clara into the back of a taxi, and fled the scene. Clara was completely passed out in the back of the cab. I tried to sit her up, but she just flopped right back onto the seat with a dull thud. As she fell, a necklace I had never seen before, which was now wrapped around her wrist, clinked sharply against the car window. I sat beside her, took her wrist, and just stared at it. Flickering light from the street lamps outside streamed in through the window, catching the delicate chain and making it look impossibly expensive and beautiful. Clara and I had both grown up poor. At our lowest point, We had once shared a single cold, hard piece of bread, washing it down with water from a public restroom tap. Even though our lives had gotten better since then, we were probably scarred by that early poverty, because neither of us had a habit of spending money extravagantly. I had seen this exact necklace in a fashion magazine one time. The six-figure price tag was staggering. Clara had also told me in the past that she didn't like wearing jewelry because it got in the way when she was trying to sketch. But now, not only was the necklace wrapped securely around her wrist, but it had also been carefully paired with matching earrings from the exact same collection, which was a complete departure from her usual style. It only confirmed my suspicion that someone else had given it to her. And my gut told me that someone was a man. I took care of Clara all night, but the very first thing she said when she woke up was, "Nathan, where's my necklace?" My hands, which were hanging at my sides, tightened into fists. As disappointed as I was, I just jutted my chin toward the nightstand. "Over there." Clara scrambled out of bed, grabbed the necklace, and inspected it carefully before she finally let out a long sigh of relief. "Thank God. I thought I'd lost it." Seeing how relieved she was, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "That necklace looks really expensive. Who gave it to you?" Clara lowered her head to fasten the necklace around her neck, and a small smile played on her lips. "Elias gave it to me. The project we were collaborating on got approved. He said it was a reward." As she spoke, she gently polished the pendant with a soft cloth, completely oblivious to the fact that her smile was stretching almost to the back of her head. Elias has such a unique eye for design. We only got the bid because of his guidance this time. He's been a total godsend. Clara just kept talking, completely lost in her own world, and didn't notice my expression slowly falling. She praised him with such sincerity, as if he had her complete and undivided attention. But she had forgotten. She had once said the exact same thing to me, back when I gave up everything to work and pay for her education. "Nathan, you're my godsend." I first met Clara in a rundown village nestled deep in the mountains of Appalachia. Her parents had died young, leaving her an orphan. None of her relatives wanted to take her in, so she was sent to live with her grandmother, who walked with a noticeable limp. I heard that to save money for Clara's school fees, her grandma would get up before dawn every single day to push her cart out and collect recyclables. She would pick up cardboard piece by piece and bundle it into a towering stack, and then she would walk for an hour over mountain roads just to sell it in the county seat. Probably because of this, Clara always seemed more mature than the other kids her age. She always woke up early to help her grandma make breakfast, and then they would leave the house together. While her grandma collected trash, Clara would cross mountain after mountain, walking in the dark to get to school. In my grandma's eyes, Clara was a filial and sensible child. So, when I reached the age where I also had to walk to school in the dark, my grandma didn't hesitate to entrust me to her. "Clara, our Nathan is a handful. From now on, I'm counting on you to protect him." My grandma said the road to school was too long and dangerous for a boy to walk alone. She would feel better if Clara was with me. I hid behind my grandma, peeking at the girl who was standing by the mud brick wall. She wore a faded dress, but her eyes were exceptionally clear and bright. She smiled at my grandma, her eyes crinkling. "Of course, Grandma. I'll definitely look after him." For some reason, the moment she said she would protect me, my heart started to pound violently. The strange, new feeling was overwhelming, and I could only press myself tighter against my grandma's back. It wasn't until I was older, when I saw people around me starting to date, that I finally realized that jolt was what people called a crush. My grandma pulled me out in front of her, slung a cloth bag she had stayed up all night making over my shoulder, and told me to follow Clara. "You hold on tight to Clara's clothes. The mountain path is rough, so don't get lost." I pressed my lips together, not daring to speak, still trying to process the sudden, unfamiliar emotions. Clara, thinking I was scared of her, gave an awkward smile and tried to smooth out the wrinkles in her skirt. Don't worry. My clothes aren't dirty." I still couldn't move, afraid that getting any closer would make my heart beat even faster. Clara picked up a dry branch from beside the wall and held it out to me. "Why don't you hold on to this? That way you won't get lost." Urged on by my grandma, I slowly took hold of the branch and followed Clara onto the path to school. And I followed her for 9 years. On our long walks in the dark, we would sometimes run into wild dogs or crazed vagrants sleeping among the graves. Whenever I was terrified, it was Clara who would grab a rock from the roadside and drive them away. She often got scraped and bruised protecting me, but every time, she would act like nothing had happened and turn back to comfort me, my eyes red with fear. "It's okay, Nathan. I'll protect you. I'll always protect you." That only made me choke up more. Clara, thinking I was just scared, would get terribly worried. Only I knew the real reason I was crying. For the first time in my life, someone was protecting me. My parents divorced early on. They were both eager to start their better lives, and I was just the baggage they left behind. When I was bullied as a kid, I would run home crying to my mother, hoping for some comfort. Instead, what I heard most often was, "Why does nobody bully anyone else? Why is it always you? It must be your fault. Don't bother me, just looking at you makes me sick." From the day I was born, I felt like a pawn in my parents' bitter games. They never cared about my feelings. They just pushed me back and forth. Then, they finally divorced. My father found a new woman and didn't want me. My mother used me to get a large child support payment from my father, then locked me in our rental apartment and disappeared with the money. Just as I was about to starve, my grandma found me. She held me, dizzy with hunger, as tears streamed down her face, repeating over and over, "What a sin, what a sin." And so I went with my grandma back to that small village surrounded by mountains. At first, she was strong enough to protect me, but then she fell gravely ill. Her vision blurred, her hearing faded, and her hands began to tremble constantly. From then on, I knew my grandma was getting old. She couldn't protect me for much longer. So when someone suddenly threw themselves in front of me, clearing away all the obstacles in my path, it was impossible not to be moved. Back then, Clara was like a ray of light breaking through the clouds, shining down on me. Clara and I grew up, and the winding mountain path didn't seem so long anymore. The branch we had casually picked up was worn smooth and shiny from our hands. Later, we both got into the county high school and started boarding there. We no longer had to walk to school in the dark, but Clara would still come and pull me to the cafeteria every day, claiming she had to watch me eat on my grandma's behalf. We were at that age of budding romance. We were so close that rumors started to spread around the school, but no matter what anyone said, I never dared to cross that thin line between us. In our senior year, Clara's grandmother, the one who had always taken care of her, passed away. With her financial support gone, Clara started skipping class frequently to work part-time jobs, and her grades plummeted. I went home and begged my grandma for a whole night. Finally, she took a neat stack of bills from under her pillow and handed them to me. "I was saving this for you to get married one day. I never thought your heart would wander off so young. Grandma's old now. I can't keep you in line anymore." My nose stung, and I hugged my grandma, sobbing. The next day, When I handed the stack of money to Clara, she just stared, taking a long moment to understand. She sniffled, her eyes turning red. "Nathan, you're all I have. From now on, I really only have you." Later, we were both accepted into Parsons. The day we got our acceptance letters, I thought my life was finally turning around. But who could have known that after giving me such a wonderful surprise, fate would deliver a devastating blow? My grandma was diagnosed with chronic liver failure. The medical bills were a bottomless pit. Clara and I each worked 2 or 3 jobs, but after paying for my grandma's hospital stay, we only had enough left for one person's tuition. After a night of agonizing, I tore up my acceptance letter and gave the money to Clara. "One of us has to climb up. I still have my grandma to take care of. Claire, you go." That day, Clara confessed her love for me. She held me tight and promised with incredible earnestness, "Nathan, you're my guardian angel. I will become the best designer, make tons and tons of money, and marry you in style." In that moment, nestled in her arms, even the wind blowing in through the window felt sweet. After graduating from college, Clara won the gold medal at a prestigious East Coast design competition with a single sketch, earning her first major payout. It was also that design that led her to Elias Thorne, an heir from a wealthy New York family. From then on, news of the handsome and well-off young master of the Thorne family, who had a keen interest in fashion design, started popping up in Clara's conversations every other day. She praised his unique taste, his insights into fashion, and his help in advancing her career. Gradually, they began appearing at public events together more and more, and the rumors about them grew wilder. People around us called them a power couple, a match made in heaven. Only Clara herself refused to admit it. Whenever I confronted her with the rumors, she would just hold me tight and explain patiently, "I'm only with him for work. Don't worry about it. Nathan, I'll never forget how good you've been to me. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. In the future, whether we're poor or rich, I will always be with you." I used to believe her. Until the day she took me to a very high-end steakhouse. It was Clara's birthday. I had asked my line supervisor for the day off early, put on a new shirt I'd bought, and carefully styled my hair for our date. But as soon as we sat down, Clara frowned. "What are you wearing? You're coming to a place like this and you don't even try to dress up?" I looked down in shame, examining the new shirt I'd bought at the mall. It wasn't a big brand, but the cut was excellent and the fabric was high quality. By any measure, it wasn't inappropriate for the occasion. I didn't understand why she was judging me so harshly. A second later, she pulled out her phone and opened Elias's Instagram. "Let me show you what Elias wears on his dates." Her finger swiped lightly across the screen, quickly pulling up a few of Elias's photos. The man in the pictures was handsome and charming, his good looks paired with one limited-edition designer suit after another, making him look incredibly sophisticated. "This is what's normal to wear to a steakhouse. See how well those suits match his vibe?" With that, she took my phone. "I'm sending you his style photos. From now on, you should study his fashion sense. You know how high the standards are in our design circle. You need to learn so you don't embarrass me when we go out." My hands gripped the fabric of my pants. It felt like she had thrown a bucket of ice water on me, ruining my entire day. "Is Elias really that great?" Clara actually nodded seriously. "He is. He's a rich kid, but he doesn't have an attitude. Most importantly, his fashion sense is incredibly sharp. He's like a compass for our industry." Sensing my mood drop, she quickly added an explanation. "I'm only praising him because he's exceptional. Nathan, you're still the most important person to me." As she spoke, she moved the steak the waiter brought over in front of me. Just as I reached for the knife and fork, Clara pressed my hand down. "Nathan, didn't you study restaurant etiquette at home beforehand? If you eat steak like that, people will laugh at you." In front of the waiter, she switched the knife and fork in my hands, explaining to me how to use them correctly, while also explaining to the server, "My boyfriend has never been to a place like this. Sorry for the scene." My face burned with shame. I wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Throughout that meal, Clara went on and on about how elegant Elias was, how he always knew the right thing to do. She sat there in her stylish suit, talking animatedly, while I just kept my head down, listening quietly, the food tasteless in my mouth. After staying up all night to care for a drunk Clara, and then working a full day, I came down with a high fever that night. Clara rushed back from her studio as soon as she got my call. "How did you get sick from one sleepless night? Your immune system is terrible." I was sprawled on the bed, weak and listless, and managed a faint smile at her. "Yeah, the assembly line is exhausting. Claire, what if I quit? You can support me, right?" Clara, who was pouring a glass of water, paused and frowned at me. "Why the sudden talk of quitting? You know my career is just taking off. I need a lot of money right now. Don't think about giving up just because of a small setback. Nathan, you should learn from Elias. He's a rich kid born with a silver spoon, but he doesn't just sit around. He comes to the office every day and works just as hard as us designers. You used to be so tough. How come now that life's a little better you're getting so dramatic?" The smile I had managed to put on slowly faded. Clara kept talking, completely forgetting that in her senior year of college, I worked a month of overtime straight to earn the startup capital for her studio, and ended up in the hospital from exhaustion. She had held me in the hospital, her eyes red, her voice choked with tears. "Nathan, I don't want you to work this hard. I'm a senior now. I can get my own design commissions. You should quit. I'll support you. I'll support you for the rest of your life." But she had forgotten everything she once said. I didn't want to go on like this. Just as I walked into the kitchen to talk things over with her, her phone rang. A handsome photo of Elias flashed on the screen. It took me a moment to realize she had set it as his custom ringtone image. I stood outside the kitchen, watching her. Her face lit up as she answered the call, but her brow quickly furrowed. "Don't move. I'm coming right now." The second she hung up, she grabbed her coat from the sofa and started for the door. I reached out and tugged on the corner of her sleeve, my voice almost a plea. "Claire, I'm sick. Can't you stay?" Clara reached out, touched my forehead, and placed a light kiss there. "Be good, Nathan. I'll be back soon." I watched her rush out the door, her figure disappearing into the night. In that moment, I knew I was probably going to lose her for good. That night, I didn't wait up for Clara. Less than half an hour after she left, I got a text from her. "Nathan, Elias sprained his ankle. His family isn't home, so I have to stay and take care of him at the hospital. Take your medicine and get some rest. Call me if you need anything." I clutched my phone, lying in bed in a daze for a long time. In the middle of the night, my forehead grew hotter and hotter. I started throwing up repeatedly. I knew I couldn't stay alone anymore. After struggling for a while, I finally called Clara. The phone rang twice before it was disconnected. I slumped onto the cold floor, too weak to even crawl back up. The pain racking my body made my hand tremble as I dialed her number again. This time it went straight to a message. "The user has switched off their phone." I quietly hung up, curled up in the darkness as a wave of pain washed over me, drowning me in the deepening gloom. 10 minutes later, the will to survive made me open my eyes again. I grabbed my phone and blindly dialed a number. This time, the phone was answered after just 2 rings. A lazy, deep voice came from the other end. "Nathan, you finally called me." It was a man's voice. I stared at the name Marcus on the screen, paused for a moment, and finally managed to croak out a plea for help. "Help me. I feel sick." On the other end, I heard the sound of a glass shattering, followed by the man's urgent voice. "What's wrong? Where are you right now? I'm coming over immediately." An hour later, I was being wheeled into the emergency room. It took the doctors 3 hours to stabilize my condition. When I was transferred to a regular ward, Marcus was standing at the door holding a stack of lab reports, one hand in his pocket, looking at me. "Acute meningitis. The doctor said if you'd come in any later, you'd be dead." A shiver of fear ran through me. I thanked him again and again. Marcus chuckled, shrugged, and helped me onto the hospital bed. "What's there to thank me for? It's what I should do. You saved my life once, now I've saved yours. We're a couple of unlucky brothers, aren't we?" I couldn't help but smile at him. It was true, I had saved Marcus's life a year ago. Marcus was a well-known investor in NYC. I'd heard his father and Elias's father were business partners, and he and Elias had known each other since they were kids. A year ago, there was a sudden power struggle in Marcus's family. To seize control of the company shares, a branch of his family had drugged his drink with a hallucinogen, hoping to get him to sign over the shares while he was incapacitated. Unfortunately for them, Marcus figured out the plan halfway through. Though he'd had the drink, he managed to escape. He fled into a back alley, only to run into some desperate thugs from a bar. They started roughing him up, and because of the drug, he was powerless to fight back. I happened to be passing by, called the police, and took him to the hospital. After that, Marcus came to find me and gave me his phone number. "Call me if you ever need anything. I'll do everything I can to help you." But I knew my place. Someone from my background couldn't be friends with a wealthy NYC heir. Calling him frequently would only be a bother. If I hadn't been at my absolute limit this time, I never would have made that call. According to the doctor's orders, I needed to stay in the hospital for 7 days of observation and IV treatment before I could be discharged. Marcus was at the hospital every day, taking care of everything. Over those few days, we slowly got to know each other better. Unlike the rich kids I'd imagined, Marcus was always warm and approachable, without any of that arrogant, superior attitude. During those 7 days, Clara never called me once. She only sent 2 texts on my 3rd day in the hospital. "I'm going on a business trip for a couple of days, about a week. I won't be coming home. Call me if you need anything." It was as if my being sick had been completely forgotten. As long as I was quiet and didn't make a fuss, she just assumed I was fine. Marcus had pieced together the state of my relationship with Clara from things I'd said. When he saw the texts she sent, he exploded. "What kind of girlfriend is that? She ignores you completely but fawns all over someone else? You're just too soft. If it were me, they'd both be pushing up daisies." Marcus stood there ranting, while I sat and listened quietly. I felt an unprecedented sense of release. Later, I asked him, "I heard your family and the Thorne family are old friends. Why does it seem like you don't like Elias?" Marcus scoffed. "That's all rumors. We're not old friends. Elias's father pulled so many shady tricks behind the scenes just to do business with my dad. As for that playboy Elias, I like him even less. He's the fakest person on the planet. I guess only a blind person would fall for him." With that, he pulled out his phone, opened Elias's Instagram, and waved it in front of my face. "Heard he's got a new girlfriend. He's on vacation with some other woman right now." Curious, I leaned in for a look. After just one glance, I couldn't smile anymore. In the photo, Elias was sitting on a yacht, laughing happily. His well-defined hand was being held by someone else. His eyes were bright, his face full of smiles. The caption underneath read, "My heart was a high-stakes gamble, and you're the winner holding all the chips." Marcus read the caption out loud a few times, making gagging noises as he did. "Isn't that disgusting? Seriously? It's like he wants the whole world to know that the great Elias Thorne is in love." I stared, trembling, at the two clasped hands in the photo. Even without seeing her face, I knew exactly who was with Elias. Clara's hands were slender and beautiful, absolutely perfect. I had always loved her hands. To help her take care of them, I would apply hand cream for her every day, massage them, and never let her do too much housework. Clara once teased me, "Do you love me, or do you love my hands?" I'd just smile slyly and say, "Of course I love both." I never imagined that one day she would use those hands I adored to hold another man. Seeing my silence and red-rimmed eyes, Marcus finally realized something was wrong. He was quiet for a moment, then suddenly exclaimed, "Holy shit!" He crushed the half-empty water bottle in his hand and threw it furiously into the trash can, then started walking out. "I'm going to go wreck them for you." I didn't let Marcus go wreck them. This was my problem. I had to solve it myself. The day I was discharged from the hospital happened to be my birthday. I bought a cake, a pair of matching couple's rings, and cooked a delicious, elaborate meal, waiting for Clara to come home. But I waited in the apartment all day, until after 11 at night, and there was still no sign of her. I sent her a text. "You said you were back from your trip. Why aren't you home?" This time she replied quickly, "I'm at the studio with Elias discussing a design draft. Be good, Nathan. Just go to sleep." I sent her a picture of the cake. "Claire, it's my 22nd birthday. Can you come home and celebrate with me?" There was a moment of silence from her end. Then she sent a quick $500 transfer. "Nathan, I'm really busy. You can celebrate your birthday any year. I promise I'll throw you a huge party next year. I have to get back to work." I wanted to try one more time, but the words I typed, I deleted. Typed again? Deleted. Again! In the end, only an empty chat box remained. It's true, you can celebrate a birthday in a year, but I only get one 22nd birthday in my entire life. A sudden downpour began, huge raindrops splattering against the window pane, extinguishing all my hope. Years ago, in weather just like this, Clara and I huddled together for warmth in our leaky rental. We had both just been accepted to Parsons, but all the money we had combined was only enough for one person's tuition. I tore up my acceptance letter in front of her and gave her the chance. She looked at me, her eyes red. "Nathan, I will be so good to you. I really wish we could get married right now." I blushed, covering my hot cheeks with a towel, pretending to be annoyed. "Get married? We're not even the legal age yet. You can't corrupt me." Clara pulled me into her arms. "I can wait, Nathan. I swear, the day after your 22nd birthday, we'll go get our marriage license." But now that I was actually 22, she had forgotten everything. I threw the couple's rings out the window, lit the candles on the cake by myself, and sang "Happy Birthday" to the sound of the rain. When the song was over, I cut myself a slice of cake and made a new wish. "Nathan, it's time to start a new life." With red eyes, I ate that piece of cake, swallowing all the pain and bitterness along with its sweetness. Then I called Marcus. "Marcus, I've made up my mind." With Marcus's help, I rented a new apartment. My love life was a disaster, and my career wasn't doing much better. The textile factory where I worked had been doing poorly for years and was going through massive layoffs. Because I had taken 7 days of sick leave from the hospital, I was one of the ones let go. As compensation, the factory gave me a huge box of thread. Everyone else sneered at it, but I treated it like a treasure. I had always loved fashion design. In my spare time, I'd always be sketching, cutting, and sewing clothes to sell online. I never had time to make finished garments before, but now that I was free, the clothes I started posting made my little online shop start buzzing. I used the thread from the factory to make clothes with intricate, heavy embroidery. I didn't expect much business, but my first piece sold less than 15 minutes after I listed it. 2 days later, the customer who received it messaged me and placed an order for 3,000 pieces. If I could complete this order, after costs, I stood to make close to $100,000. I stared at the number in the chat box, completely stunned, and confirmed it with the client several times. After some back and forth, we agreed on a 3-month delivery time. To secure the order, I asked for a 30% deposit up front, which he readily agreed to. I excitedly called Marcus, and with his help, I rented a small workshop. We bought a few used heavy embroidery machines from a second-hand market. I thought that once I had the pattern samples down, production would be smooth sailing. But I ran into a problem while making the samples. The thread the factory gave me was high quality, but it had major issues with dye bleeding. Using the original thread would save a lot on costs, but the finished clothes would bleed color when washed. Although the severity of the bleeding depended on the fabric, it would still affect the overall look. How could I save costs while still producing the highest quality work? Even with all my years in the textile industry, I still lacked experience with these kinds of problems. To solve this, I took a train to Boston to find my old mentor, who had retired there years ago. My mentor's name was Professor Finch. He had once been a wealthy, second-generation kid from a prominent family. His family had sent him to a rural village to volunteer teach, as a way for him to experience life. Our entire school was under his tutelage. Decades had passed. Professor Finch no longer had the youthful vigor of his past. His face was lined with wrinkles, but he carried himself with a dignified and commanding presence. He was quite surprised when I told him I had come to solve a problem with heavy embroidery. I always thought it was such a shame when you tore up your acceptance letter for Clara, all those years ago. Later, I heard from your old classmates that you'd stopped studying. I thought you'd really given up on design, but I never expected you were secretly studying embroidery. I scratched my head, a little embarrassed. Giving up school back then was partly to give Clara the chance, but it was also because my grandma was very sick. If I had gone to school, there would have been no one to take care of her. The decision to give up my spot for Clara had been a huge internal struggle. What ultimately made me decide to quit school and go to work was my grandma's urgent need for money for her treatment. My mother may not have wanted me, but my grandma was incredibly good to me. If she hadn't rescued me from that rental apartment when I was a kid, I probably would have starved to death. So when she was sick in bed, I couldn't bring myself to abandon her. Even though all my hard work couldn't save her life, I did my best. That was enough. Professor, I'm starting over now. It's not too late, I said, looking at him with determination. Professor Finch took a slow sip of his hot tea and nodded with satisfaction. Studying embroidery is good. It's part of our own heritage. It's important for us to promote and preserve what is ours. I lowered my head humbly, listening as Professor Finch explained the problems one might encounter when creating patterns for heavy embroidery, soaking it all in like a precious treasure. To help me better understand the art of embroidered textiles, the professor took me to his private collection. It was filled with the fruits of his years of labor. At the entrance stood a massive landscape scroll. I gently touched the piece, which had a stunning double-sided three-dimensional effect, and felt a profound sense of awe. The figures on it were so lifelike, the flowers and trees so vivid, it was as if they were growing right out of the silk. "Professor, this is—" Professor Finch, though old, had eyes that shone with light. "This is the pinnacle of traditional Chinese silk art. You've been in the textile industry for so long. Have you ever heard the saying, 'An inch of kisi is worth an inch of gold'?" A heart that had been dormant for years suddenly began to beat wildly, filled with novelty and excitement. "I have. Of course I have. So this is the sacred craft of weaving, the textile art once reserved for royalty." Professor Finch nodded gently. "Of all the students I taught, only you and Clara had the most talent for design. It's a shame that after Clara got into art school, all she learned were Western design concepts. She knows nothing about our traditional aesthetics. I hope you will be more grounded, with a more long-term vision, and bring the beauty of our heritage to the world." That day, Professor Finch and I talked for a long time, until dusk settled over his small courtyard. On the way back, I couldn't help but think of the time Clara and I spent crossing mountains to get to school. School was hard, but we enjoyed it because our volunteer teacher, Professor Finch, was truly interesting. Back then, besides teaching us language, math, and English, Professor Finch would occasionally act as our art teacher. One time, Clara and I were late for school and were being punished by the gym teacher, forced to stand under a tree. Professor Finch, who was reading nearby, got bored and called us over to chat. He and Clara talked animatedly, but I was fascinated by the books beside him. After getting his permission, I picked them up and flipped through them. To this day, I still remember those two books. One was called Traditional Chinese Colors, and the other was a folio of folk embroidery. Seeing my fascination, the professor began to explain what cloisonné was, which had astonished the West after crossing the oceans, what distant mountain green was, the shade of eyeshadow on a beautiful woman's face, what sunset clouds and a lone duck flying together, autumn waters merging with the endless sky meant in the vast expanse of blue-green waves, and what where clouds break after the rain, such a color to be made for the future, represented. The zenith of Song Dynasty aesthetics. Clara and I listened, utterly captivated. Later, when Professor Finch saw us secretly sketching clothing designs in the sand, he went out of his way to find relevant books for us to borrow, urging us, "You must study hard. If you can, try to get into the design program at a national art academy, and in the future, carry our traditions forward. Eastern aesthetics are the highest form of elegance. I hope you will bring the beauty of our heritage to the world." I had always kept those words in my heart, and I believed Clara had too. But unfortunately, after she got into art school, she was in such a hurry to make money that she hastily learned Western design concepts and never had the patience to study traditional aesthetics. To help me properly learn the art of kisi, Professor Finch wrote a letter of recommendation for me. When I got back to my apartment, I took the letter and found Mr. Lin, a master craftsman who specialized in kisi. From then on, I became incredibly busy. Once I solved the pattern-making problem for the heavy embroidery, I hired several textile workers to help me produce the garments around the clock. With the production line running smoothly, I freed up my time. During the day, I would go to Mr. Lin's small courtyard to practice the kisi technique with him, and at night, I would return to my workshop to check on the production progress with Marcus. I was so busy day and night that I hadn't thought about Clara in a long time. If she hadn't shown up at my door with a cake, I might have forgotten she even existed. I counted the days and realized it had been a month since I moved out of Clara's apartment. She had called me during that time, but I had ignored every call. After a month apart, Clara looked haggard. She leaned against the door of my apartment and gave me a tired smile. "Nathan, how long are you going to keep this up? So I didn't come home for your birthday. Is that really a reason to run away from home?" With that, she placed the cake box firmly in my hands. "I bought this cake especially for you. This place is super expensive, the fanciest in the city. They only make a limited number each day, so it's really hard to get." I looked down at the cake in my hands. The small, delicate cake was decorated with yellow mango flesh. "Now that you've accepted my cake, you can't be mad at me anymore. Come home with me." Clara was still standing in the doorway, talking to herself. I looked up at her, my expression cold, and asked in a low voice, "Who told you to buy this cake?" Seeing my expression, Clara froze for a second. She paused, then said without hesitation, "Elias told me to. He said the mango cake from this shop is the best." I almost laughed out loud. Elias, Elias. It's always Elias. "Clara, we've lived together for so long. Have you forgotten that I'm allergic to mangoes?" The woman in front of me looked as if she had just woken from a dream. She reached out to grab my wrist and explain, but I moved first, slamming the cake against her and shutting the door with a loud thud. "Clara, we're breaking up." I slid down the back of the door, slumping onto the cold floor. On the other side, Clara leaned against the door, screaming in fury. "Nathan, have you had enough of this drama? I came here to apologize in good faith, and this is the attitude you give me? It was just the wrong cake. Do you have to be like this?" When her screams got no reaction and the door remained closed, Clara kicked it in frustration. "Nathan, I'm giving you one last chance. Open this door and come home with me. If you come home with me, I'll forget all about this tantrum you've thrown today." I wrapped my arms around my legs and buried my head in my knees, tears falling one by one. Clara pounded on the door outside until she was tired. Then she yelled one last time, "Fine, break up! Who's afraid of who?" The woman outside was gone for good. I stayed curled up in the corner. I don't know how long passed before the doorknob turned. Marcus opened the door with his key and looked at me, a little flustered. When he saw me on the floor with tears streaming down my face, he clearly froze. "Did that bitch come looking for you?" I nodded helplessly. Marcus grabbed a baseball bat from the floor. I'm gonna go wreck her!" I stopped the furious Marcus. As awful as Clara was, she wasn't worth ruining his life over. To calm him down, I swore to him repeatedly, "I've really decided to let her go. She can't hurt me anymore. Don't worry." Marcus studied my red-rimmed eyes, confirming it over and over, before finally waving his hand in resignation. "If you say so. But if she dares to come back, I can't promise I'll be able to control myself." I always felt that Marcus had a special ability. Just talking to him for a bit could make me forget a lot of my troubles. After our fight that day, Clara really didn't come looking for me again. That was for the best. It gave me more time to focus on what I loved without being plagued by emotions. I thought that as long as I didn't see her, I would one day completely forget the pain she had caused me. But fate didn't give me a chance to escape. In just a week, I ran into Clara again. Only this time, there was a man by her side. When Elias appeared before me with his arm linked through Clara's, the disdain and mockery in his eyes were practically overflowing. "Nathan, aren't you working on an assembly line? What are you doing at the fabric market?" I looked up and met Clara's eyes. Her gaze was completely cold. I silently looked away and continued picking out fabric, ignoring Elias. Being ignored, Elias got flustered. He brazenly tightened his arm around Clara's, pulling her even closer. "Look at you. Are you planning on producing your own clothes? With the little experience you picked up on the production line, you'd better not lose all your money." My eyes fell on her arm, linked with Elias's. Clara noticed my gaze, but showed no guilt. Instead, she pulled his arm over, allowing him to hold her even tighter. How sweet. I couldn't help but sneer. "That's none of your business. Mr. Thorne should just worry about himself." Elias, always so high and mighty, was not used to being brushed off. He whined to Clara like a child. "Look at him. He's bullying me. You have to help me." Clara gently patted his head, trying to soothe him. "He doesn't know any better. Let's just ignore him. It's not worth getting upset." I completely ignored their lovey-dovey act, finished selecting my fabrics, confirmed everything with the shop owner, and was about to leave. But then Clara said to the owner, "Sir, all the fabrics Mr. G just wanted? Send them all to my studio first. I'm a regular customer. You should prioritize me." I froze, looking at Clara in disbelief. She just smiled at me, completely at ease, then turned to Elias with a gentle expression. "Elias, do you feel better now?" Elias looked smug, resting his head on Clara's shoulder. "I knew you wouldn't let me get bullied." With that, he started rushing the shop owner. "Didn't you hear what Clara said? Hurry up and send all these fabrics to her studio." He finished with a provocative glance in my direction. "I'll pay double the price." The fabric owner looked at me, completely torn. I knew the Thorne family's status in New York. These shop owners didn't dare to cross him. But if I let them take the fabric, my production schedule would be delayed, and it would be hard for me to do business in this market in the future. I looked up at Clara, trying my best to stay calm. "Your studio mainly does women's suits and formal dresses. These fabrics aren't even suitable for that." I thought that based on our years together, she would at least help me out a little. But Clara just turned her head and said coldly, "Even if I don't need them, I'll buy them if it makes Elias happy." I opened my mouth to speak, but for the sake of my business, I chose to soften my tone first. "Clara, we lived together for so many years. Do you really have to be like this?" Hearing this, Clara suddenly laughed. "So what if we lived together for years? Weren't you the one who wanted to break up with me? Since we broke up, we should make a clean break, shouldn't we?" I stared at Clara, suddenly feeling like she was a complete stranger. Just then, Marcus, who had come to the fabric market with me to hang out, rushed in from the back entrance holding a fire extinguisher. Before Clara could react, he slammed it with a loud clang onto the shelf behind her. The massive noise and vibration made her scream and fall to the ground. The shock was so great that her vision went black and she fainted. Marcus threw the fire extinguisher on the ground and pointed at her, roaring, "A clean break, huh? If that's the case, then how about you pay back the money my boy Nathan spent putting you through school all these years? I've lived a long time, and I've never seen someone so shameless about being a freeloader." Elias's face went pale. He pointed at Marcus, threatening to call the police. Marcus just laughed, pulling out a USB drive and fiddling with it in his hand. "I've got all the dirty little secrets about the Thorne family's tax evasion right here. If you want to bring the whole Thorne empire down with you, go ahead. Call the cops." In the end, Elias didn't dare risk his entire family and had to swallow his anger. With Marcus's help, I got my fabric and completed the order within 3 months. As agreed, the buyer paid the remaining balance in full. With money in hand, I felt more confident. To better focus on learning the art of kisi, I didn't take on any more large orders. When Clara found out, she came to me again. "Nathan, I know you want to prove yourself, but starting a business is no joke. Look at what you're doing now. You have no orders. How are you going to support yourself? I was wrong before. I shouldn't have compared you to Elias. Let's both take a step back and go back to how things were, okay?" I looked at Clara and suddenly felt so tired. No, I don't want to go back to how things were. Clara grabbed my shoulders, her eyes wide with disbelief. How could you not want to go back? Nathan, you love me. Why wouldn't you want to go back to how we were? I gently pried her hands off and looked at her coldly. Clara, I did give you chances. When I had a fever, I begged you not to leave, but you chose Elias, and I almost died at home. On my 22nd birthday, I asked you to come back, but you still chose Elias, so I threw away the rings I had bought. Clara, you're the one who made me give up all my hopes for you. Now I don't hope for you anymore. We're completely over. Clara stood there stunned, her lips trembling uncontrollably. What's this about dying? What are you talking about? I ignored her. That day, I walked away without a second glance. Later, I heard that Clara went crazy, going to the hospital where I had stayed to check my records. When she saw the diagnosis of acute meningitis and realized I had almost died at home, she collapsed to her knees, her whole body shaking violently. I also heard she tore up the entire yard of her apartment building just to find 2 small couples' rings. I didn't have time to care about Clara's breakdown. I was too busy creating my first Casey piece. The Casey production process is rigorous. I turned off my phone and cut off all contact with the outside world for 8 months. The only person who could reach me was Marcus. 8 months later, my first Casey piece was finished. Marcus encouraged me to enter it in a fashion exhibition hosted by his family's company. Clara was also at that exhibition, supposedly as Elias's fiancée. The day I emerged from my seclusion, Marcus filled me in on the gossip. He told me that while I was away, Clara had come looking for me every day, but he had turned her away each time. Unable to find me, Clara started drinking heavily and even stopped going to her studio. Elias was an arrogant man. How could he tolerate the woman he'd chosen being in love with someone else? To win her heart completely, he played some tricks. After a drunken night, they slept together. The next morning, the story was all over the New York press. They were expected to get married soon. When the exhibition began, I saw Elias enter with Clara on his arm. She looked exhausted as she greeted old colleagues, but most of them barely acknowledged her. To control her, Elias had forced her to close her studio and stay home to prepare for the baby. When Clara resisted, Elias used his family's influence to pressure her studio, cutting off its fabric supply and freezing its capital. She had tried to fight back, but Elias threatened her with the child, and in the end, she had no choice but to give in. Now, unable to produce any outstanding work, Clara was no longer the shining star she once was in the industry. Marcus asked me if seeing Clara now still made me sad. If you're upset, I don't mind going over there and smashing something for you again. I looked up at Clara, meek and submissive beside Elias, and suddenly smiled. Make me sad? The way she is now, she's not even worthy. My piece was scheduled for the end of the exhibition, the crowning jewel of the entire show. When I stepped onto the runway wearing the garment I had woven with my own hands, a wave of gasps rippled through the audience. I was incredibly excited, but I forced myself to stay calm, explaining detail by detail the beauty of our country's traditional aesthetics to the attendees. The debut of the Casey piece stunned everyone present. After the presentation, I walked off stage to a storm of applause. I looked down and saw Clara standing in the crowd, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't understand. The next second, Elias, standing beside her, slapped her across the face and dragged her away in a rage. Later, I heard that Elias brought a relative of Clara's, a man named Julian, to live in their home. To control her, he installed surveillance cameras and cut off all her credit cards, forcing her to be a full-time housewife. In just 2 short years, Clara went from being a rising star in the design world to a housewife with empty eyes. Even more unexpectedly, after they were married, Elias, emboldened by his family's power and wealth, began to cheat. When Clara asked for a divorce, Elias demanded she leave with nothing. They fought over assets for a long time. To escape, Clara collected evidence of the Thorne family's tax evasion. After she reported them, the family's finances were investigated, and the once mighty Thorne family of New York fell overnight. The Thornes harbored a deep grudge against Clara for this. Within half a month, she was in 3 car accidents. I heard that in the last one. The hands she was so proud of, the hands that drew her designs, were crushed by a car. She could never sketch a design again. 6 months later, news broke that Clara, who was suffering from severe depression, had dragged Elias into the river with her. When their bodies surfaced, they were still locked in a death grip. Hearing the news from Marcus, I felt a wave of sorrow, but I didn't have much time for reflection. I was too busy. The exhibition hosted by Marcus's family was a massive success, thanks to the appearance of the Kessiart work. After that show, more and more people began to pay attention to traditional Eastern aesthetics. Marcus and I joined forces to register our own clothing brand. The day our ready-to-wear line launched, it received widespread acclaim. With his family's support, our brand grew larger and larger, finally breaking onto the international stage 3 years later, appearing at Paris Fashion Week. 3 years later, I returned to Boston with my good news to see Professor Finch. We talked for a long time. The professor told me, "Eastern aesthetics are the highest form of elegance. They may have been quiet for a time, but things with deep roots will always see the light of day again. People are the same way. We may be covered in dust, we may be defeated and hurt, but a true gem, if it is resilient enough to break free from the past, will eventually have its dust wiped away and shine brightly enough to light up the world."